Okay, the next thing we're going to cover here in Ochos Pesach are the concept of kashering kelim. Because basically people have to kosher their stoves, their stovetops. Many times people don't have enough kelim, they need to kasher the kelim. Even though halachically in Shulchan Aruch it says it's best not to kosher anything for Pesach, to get everything new. And the reason for that is because maybe you didn't kasher it properly, maybe it wasn't cleaned properly. You can't always know. But I want to first give an introduction to the concept of kashering, and then we can understand the dinim and how you have to kasher certain things because of it. The Gemara's rule is kabbalah kach pelte. The way it goes in is the way it goes out. That's the halacha. The way something goes in to a vessel, that's the way it goes out. Now the way it goes into a vessel, halachically, is most of the time through heat. So in other words, if I have a brand new pot, mamish, the brand new, and I cook chicken, this year round I'm saying, and I cook chicken soup in the pot. And then, it's good, huh? It's a chicken soup, huh? It depends who makes it, how it's made. Okay. So what happens, I cook chicken soup in the pot, then I empty out the chicken soup, I mamish wash the pot spotlessly clean. Nevertheless, we know it's considered a meat pot. Now the question is, why is it a meat pot? There's no meat in it. So the answer is, heat causes absorption within the walls of the utensil. That means if I take a pot and cook meat in it, chicken soup or whatever, then inside the walls of the pot becomes absorbed a taste of meat. Therefore, how did it go in? It went in through hot water. It was cooking liquid in the pot that made the pot absorb through liquid. Therefore, how do you take that out? Also through hot water. Okay, that method is called Hagala, or Hagala as it's called in yeshiva language, Hagala, which means the purging process. The way it went in, that's the way it goes out. No. Now, some materials absorb and don't spit out. So for instance, earthenware utensils, cheres, earthenware utensils, when you cook food in it, it absorbs in the taste of within the walls. But earthenware kelim, the Gemara says, it never comes out completely. You'll kasher it once in boiling hot water, a little bit will come out. You kasher it a second time, a little bit. It'll never come out completely. So now what's the issue with all this? If I have a meat pot, okay, that I cook chicken soup in, and now it's spotlessly clean, but nevertheless there's a taste of meat absorbed within the walls of the pot. Now if I take the same pot and cook dairy in it, so two things are happening. The absorbed taste of meat, now it's again heat, the absorbed taste of meat that went in there through heat is now going to come out into the dairy food that I ate, that I'm cooking. So now you have, in the dairy, you have a taste of meat. So now you have a mixture of meat and milk together, which would make the food treif under many circumstances. And not only would it make the food treif, it would make the pot treif.
Much less than 1/60.
Oh, so now the question is, how much is absorbed within the walls of the pot? So the Gemara says like this, Halacha says the following. Because this is a pot, okay? So now you're cooking in the pot. Now it becomes chicken soup, right? So now it becomes absorbed within the walls of the pot. How much becomes absorbed? We don't know. No, not miskura. We don't know exactly how much. Therefore, because we don't know how much, we assume that the whole wall of the utensil is full of chicken, full of meat. That's what halacha says. We assume that because we don't know how much went in. And we're talking about biblical prohibitions in meat and milk. So therefore, because we don't know how much went in, we have to assume that the whole wall is meat. And practically speaking, the wall does not have, inside is not 60 times the amount of the wall itself. So therefore, if it would cook milk in the same, dairy in the same pot, so what happens is the taste of the meat comes out into the milk, and the milk taste goes back into the meat pot, so you have everything straight. That din though applies, I'm explaining that we should understand concepts, that din applies only if the meat pot was cooked within 24 hours of the time you cooked the milk. In other words, if Monday night I cooked chicken soup in the pot, and then Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday morning I cooked dairy, so then everything becomes straight. The dairy becomes straight because there was a taste of meat absorbed in the vessel that comes out into the dairy. The dairy taste goes back into the pot, so everything's straight. You're not allowed to eat the food, and so on and so forth. But what happens halachically if I cooked chicken soup Monday night? Monday night I cooked chicken soup. Now the pot is completely clean. I washed it well. And Wednesday day, I cooked dairy in the pot. So it's more than 24 hours from the time the meat was cooked inside the pot. So the Chazal say, after 24 hours of absorption, the absorbed taste becomes blemished. It's called in halacha language, noisin tam libgam. It gives a taste, but it's a blemished taste. So therefore, what happens if I cook chicken soup in a pot Monday night, and then Wednesday afternoon, so it's more than 24 hours, I cook dairy, the dairy food would be kosher. Why? What are we afraid of? The meat taste from absorption went into the dairy, that taste is already spoiled because it's more than 24 hours. That's only an absorbed taste. By the way, is it blemished after 24 hours? So therefore, the dairy food would be kosher to eat. The pot becomes not kosher.
How about the food if it's parrot? Would it be parrot still and we could still...
If the food, one second. If the food, parrot food, was cooked within 24 hours of the meat, then the din is, the food isn't, because it's parrot, is not really dairy, but you can't eat it, the dairy food together, the parrot food, the parrot food together with meat. You could eat it right before, you could eat it right after, not with the meat. I'm sorry. You can't eat it with dairy. I'm correct. I'm sorry. I'm not thinking. You cannot eat it together with dairy. You can have it right before the dairy or right after the dairy. But not together with dairy. Why? Because the taste of meat, which was still fresh, doesn't make the parrot food fleshik. But it makes it fleshik enough that you can't have it together with milk.
After 24 hours,
If it was not used for 24 hours, and then you cook something parv in it, then you can have it together with milk. I'll give you a very practical example of this, by the way. Somebody baked challah Friday afternoon. Okay? First they baked their chicken or meat in the oven. Yes? And the oven's clean. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they baked their chicken. Now, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they're going to bake challah in the oven. Now, this challah was baked in an oven that had fresh meat taste. Right? So if you eat that challah, it's not going to make you meat that you have to wait 6 hours. But if on Sunday you want to take the leftover challah and smear cream cheese on it, you wouldn't be allowed to. Because this challah was baked in an oven that fleishik was baked that day within 24 hours. You understand? But if the oven wasn't used for 24 hours, and then you bake challah, the challah is 100% part. Another practical case of this, by the way, is many people bake a cake Friday afternoon in the oven. Yeah, for Shabbos they bake a cake. After they made the chicken in the oven and everything. So now they bake a cake for Shabbos. So now you want to have Shabbos morning, you want to have coffee and cake. Right? If your coffee has milk in it, you can't eat that cake together with the coffee. You can eat it right before, you can eat it right after, but you can't eat it together with the milk and the coffee. Why? Because it's enough meat in it that you don't eat it directly.
Even if it wasn't used 24 hours?
I just said you baked the chicken and that day you baked cake. If it wasn't used for 24 hours, we just said then you could. Chatchila you could.
What happens if you go to someone's house and you don't know? Can you assume that it's part?
There's a din in halacha. What happens if you don't know if a vessel was used within 24 hours or not? So the halacha is stam kelim eina ben yoma. You assume that it wasn't used for 24 hours. If you know it was used for within 24 hours, it's a different din. Huh? I'm saying you can ask. Yeah, you can ask, but technically, they're not around to ask. You know, so you halachically you assume, unless if it's a situation where people bake cakes and then they're fleishik oven when they just bake the chicken, then it's a different story.
Sorry, you say you're not allowed to ask.
I said you could ask. I said, what happens if they're not around to ask?
Do you have to ask?
It's better to ask. If you can find out, you find out. Halacha says any doubt that you can find out the result of the doubt is not a doubt.
So
Find out.
Sometimes they write baked in a fleishik oven. What can you assume from that? If the oven was clean or not, you wouldn't know, or you just said baked in a fleishik oven.
I had a few questions today in kitchen dinim, and I learned already that when you ask the person, ask the person, is the oven clean?
Of course.
No. Most of them don't lie. Most people will say, not really. If the oven's not clean, this whole thing doesn't apply. If you bake cake in a fleishik oven, that's dirty, you can't eat that cake. It doesn't matter if it was used 24 hours or not.
Define clean.
Huh?
Define clean.
I don't mean here and there a little piece, but many people, it's caked on stuff and the oven's dirty.
Like there's a little bit of discoloration on the walls.
Discoloration is not a problem. There's no substance. It depends how much, but again, how people define clean is different interpretations of clean.
Sometimes there are crumbs from bread that you put in. Sometimes crumbs from bread, or sometimes when you put in the soup, it spills over and it stays over there.
In the oven.
The oven.
So then the oven's dirty. Huh? No, you're saying in the oven or on the stovetop? In the oven. What?
Any consideration is given not to offend the host, not to be too inquisitive, because lest you will offend the
I will paraphrase your question. I'm going to paraphrase your question. There's a strong possibility my host is giving me poison. Is it rude to ask the person maybe it's poison or not? Or should I not ask because I might hurt the host's feeling? What would you answer to that question?
So
I'm asking you, what would you answer to that question?
I think you're implying that don't take any chances.
Non-kosher is poison. So I'm saying, just like poison, you're not going to say, well, I don't want to hurt the person's feelings because maybe it's laced with arsenic or whatever, but I don't want to embarrass the person to ask them because they may feel insulted.
Your comparison is irrelevant because we are not talking about life and death.
Yes, the Kasher says life and death. For a Jew,
not physically. I'm saying
spiritual death is worse than physical death. And it's 1 minute left and I'll explain to you why. Physical death, we eventually die anyway. So even when we're alive, it's just the beginning of the process of death. There's a famous Rabbeinu Bachai or Bachi, whichever way you want to pronounce it. At the beginning of Chumash, beginning of Bereishit, Rabbeinu Bachai was a Rishon. He says, "Atinig miyad sheneilen maschul yisyabish." In simple English, it means a child, as soon as they're born, begin to die. Why? Because the second you're born, you have 120 years power to live. Now you're a day old, you only have 119 years, 364 days, right, to live. So you begin to die. Spiritual death is eternal. So, especially according to the way Chassidus explains things, physical death is not as bad as spiritual death.